First, I'd like to thank everyone for being here for my final presentation. I'd also like to thank Dr. Norander and Dr. Dillon for their help and support on my pilot study titled, If You Opt Out, How Are You Going to Get Back In? Exploring College Students' Perceptions on Work-Life Balance. Today I want to talk to you about why this subject is important, the sensitizing concepts or the literature that provided a foundation for it. I'll briefly touch on the methodology and then talk about some of the emergent themes I found from the data. The genesis of this project was actually my 701 class, Introduction to Graduate Studies. I was asked to write a comprehensive literature review, and I chose to look at women in organizations, specifically leadership. The findings were disheartening and made my future look challenging, so I set the paper aside, vowing not to look at it again. Fast forward to the end of my graduate program, and suddenly I found out my husband and I were going to have a family. And issues of being a woman in the workforce became very important to me again. At this point you may be thinking, is it appropriate to address pregnancy in a college presentation? If you are thinking that, hold that thought. Because a question of what is taboo or what is appropriate to talk about in a professional setting is at the heart of why this research is important. The next thing that's important about this research is our current social setting. As of this year, women occupy over 50% of the workforce. According to Fine and College's 2009 report, women are occupying less than 6% of top earners, less than 13% of board members, and are overall lacking in representation of any position of power. Is it a lack of education? No. Women are currently earning over 50% of bachelor's and master's degrees. Now, unfortunately, often policies, like work-life policies, are both drafted and implemented from positions of power. So this can create an issue for work-life balance to exist for people in the workforce. The last reason why this research is important is Busnell's 1995 article, which explains that glass ceilings, or that invisible layer for advancement, is not only a process, but a result of how we talk. This means that when you are by the water cooler, when you are at home with friends, when you are at board meetings, how you are talking both reinforces gender ideologies and affects some of the policies we have in our very workforce. That's why I'm going to put communication at the heart of the themes I found in the literature. Within the literature, I found three themes. The first one relates to organizational expectations, or org expectations. Next relates to a lack of sincerity towards work-life balance. And then lastly, I'm going to look at two types of confining discourse. These organizational expectations can be an issue because they follow the idea of think manager, think male. This popular discourse relates managerial qualities to agentic qualities such as being assertive, being aggressive, being competitive and forceful, and women are seen as not possessing these qualities. Therefore, they are evaluated, rewarded, and perceived differently than men in organizations. The second theme relates to a lack of sincerity towards work-life balance or work-life policies in general. Tracy and Riviera conducted 2010 research here in Missouri, and they interviewed top executives from organizations. When the executives were asked about work-life policies, they often responded by describing their personal stories or narratives. For example, one executive said, "I think it's important that someone be home to write the thank you notes." So an underlying theme was that work-life policies didn't really need attention because women should really be at home. The final theme I found in the research relates to two different types of broad discourse, one being between supervisors and upper-level management downwards, and the other being between peers. The first one is the business case. This makes terms like diversity acceptable to talk about, but terms like women's issues or feminism inappropriate for an organization. Here's the problem, is that women's issues are really society's issues. Meaning, when they say a woman's issue, they can be talking about leaving to take care of a sick parent, going home to take care of a sick child, or leaving to have a baby. This is really something that affects all members of our organization, but when we silence women's issues, we silence all of those issues. The other type of confining discourse relates to how employees talk to one another. For example, if a woman were to leave for maternity leave and come back to the organization, comments like, "Oh, did you have a great vacation away from work?" creates tension and causes employees to feel uncomfortable about taking advantage of different policies that may exist within their companies. Now, interestingly, while I was reviewing this literature, I found that there are no current articles explaining what our next generation is thinking. What are the next workers going to talk about? How do they view these issues? Well, this opens up a great window to explore college students' perceptions of work-life balance, because they are being trained and geared to lead us in the workforce. So, to explore this, I came up with 3 research questions. The first question being, how do college students describe gender differences in the workforce? The second research question being, how do college students negotiate power within organizations? The last research question being, how do college students explain their desires for work-life balance? To conduct this research, I took a qualitative approach. This allows the unique perceptions of the individual to be heard. I also employed focus groups. 4 focus groups were conducted. Within those were both males and females. These were chosen because of their complementary interactions. Participants were between the ages of 18 to 22. They were childless and unmarried. So putting them in focus groups made them feel more comfortable talking about something they may not be familiar with. So, after the focus groups, I found 3 emergent themes from the data. As I mentioned, this is a pilot study. I don't believe this has reached saturation, so more needs to be done to understand this phenomena. But these 3 themes can guide us into understanding more and developing future research. My first finding relates to gender ideologies. Both male and female college students reiterated the female as caregiver and the male as breadwinner stereotypes. When they talked about their futures, they expected to deal with these issues, meaning females expected to leave work early, to have to take more time off, and overall take care of the home and their work issues. Within this discussion, change was mentioned, but mostly college students explained this as factual. The next theme I noted relates to how college students view their own power in organizations. Both males and females expressed a desire that their employers would be flexible with their school schedules, meaning giving them the night off if they had a large exam. But they explained that their future careers should not and would not cater to any personal family concerns. They also stated that they believed to truly advance in an organization, someone should dedicate their entire lives and put in as many hours as possible and then eventually earn some time away from that organization. Here they equated advancement with hours and level of dedication. Women in particular felt that they had little power in negotiating this. Female participants said that they would not bring up any questions of work-life balance in an interview because it would make them feel uncomfortable. The final theme I noted related to the desires of both students. These first 2 themes really reinforce the literature I read on this subject, meaning gender ideologies are still very present. Some of the stereotypes are still in our language. There's still issues of feeling like we don't have power where the organization can give us things like work-life policies. This showed an interest in fulfillment for both males and females. They expressed that they want a balanced career and a balanced home life. Unfortunately, within this was also fear. One female student noted that if she were to leave the workforce, how would she get back in? And this led to the title of my paper, If You Opt Out, How Are You Going to Get Back In? So that fear of if you leave to take time for your family, you're not going to be able to be successful in your career. These 3 themes were labeled specifically by comments of the participants. So the first one relating to gender ideologies was titled, "Ladies, I'm not trying to be sexist here. when a male explained that CEOs are men. The second theme, relating to power in organizations, was titled, "There are certain things you just shouldn't talk about." This related to a female student explaining that she didn't want to appear lazy in an interview when talking about work-life policy. The last theme I noted said, of course, if you opt out, how are you going to get back in? Explaining that students are afraid to take time away from work, but are desiring to have balance in both of their careers. As I mentioned, there's a lot more to study on this subject. From my research, I would suggest education to college students. Many times they were unfamiliar with work-life policies, one of them stating maternity leave is like 2 or 3 weeks, right? So education on what they can and what they deserve in an organization is important. Also, future research could evenly divide focus groups between males and females, because I saw a difference in how the sexes were responding to these questions. Overall, this provides us more understanding of our present and can lead to a greater understanding of our future.